and then good afternoon, good morning, whatever the time in your own countries. Thank you so much, Rajat, Arvind, Nitin, for providing this opportunity to me to present this particular uh, chapter from a very interesting book, which I don't know how many times that I have read now, and definitely have become a big fan of this gentleman called John C. Maxwell, John Calvin Maxwell, was also a doctorate, so Dr. John C. Maxwell. The agenda for this call is primarily that, start off with a little bit of insight on Dr. John C. Maxwell. I'm sure that if not all, few of you would definitely know of him and would have, at some point of time, uh, read his books or went on to his, um, website, or may have even perhaps also attended his conference. So I'll spend a little bit of time there. Then I get onto this very specific, I would say, chapter, which I have picked up from his book called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. Spend some time in terms of what is it that he is talking about as far as the law of the lid is concerned. And the best part of his book is that he narrates it in a very easy to read and a very, I would say, story form. So he has examples from real life world, which is from the corporate or from the political, sports, etc. In fact, it goes to all walks of life for that matter. So to illustrate his first law, which is the law of the lid, and where the tagline is leadership ability determines a person's level of effectiveness, he has a story, which again I'm sure is that some of you would have heard. And some of you might also perhaps be using that story in your own training and coaching opportunity, but then a refresher never hurts. So I would like to spend some time there. And then again, since I'm speaking to, colleagues from the fraternity, who definitely are subject matter experts and who force people to reflect on topics and situations, I would spend some time asking you to reflect as to how do you think this topic connects to all of us from the coaching fraternity. Does that plan seems to be okay for everyone?
Yes.
All right. Great. Thank you. So let's spend a little bit of time in terms of who this gentleman is, Dr. John C. Maxwell. Rajat, maybe you will have to take it. I don't know why it's not allowing me. Oops. Yeah, thank you. So Dr. John Calvin Maxwell, born in 1947, is one of the most, you can go back. Yeah, thank you. So he's a very coveted author, speaker, and leadership, I would say, guru. At the same time, he's primarily a pastor by profession. But he goes all over the world in order to teach leadership to people. And again, as I said, not just only in the church world, but also in the corporate world as well as the sports world. He's founded 4 different companies, and these are listed here: Enjoy, Maximum Impact, the John Maxwell Team, ISS, which is, I think, Enjoy Some Services and Equip. And I don't know if I could be a little, mixing it up with Enjoy and ISS. As far as Equip is concerned, that's his company that goes and develops leaders across 80 nations. As I said, that he's a celebrated author, and here are just few books listed here. It's not the exhaustive list, but a demonstrative list of many that he's written. And the most, I would say, sold out copies have been around the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, the 21 Indispensable Qualities of a Leader, Developing the Leader with You, Developing the Leaders Around You. His latest books being Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn, and the one that he's launched in 2017 is No Limits. Uh, I am unfortunately not being able to see what is my last bullet there. Can you read that out, Rajat?
Yeah, that's the website, which is
Okay.
johnmaxwell.com.
Right. So that's the website, and you can actually generally go there, explore his websites because it's got a wealth of information. It's got certain assessments that you can take as far as your own leadership is concerned, and you can possibly use some of this also on your client. Okay. Let me get to the next slide, which is a little bit of preamble of what he has to say about leadership and specifically on the 21 laws. So he says that leadership is leadership. The true principles of leaderships are constant and they stand the test of time. It doesn't necessarily gets impacted by ethnicity. It doesn't get impacted by the generation that is dealing with leadership, because what he in his argument says is that whether it was many centuries back versus today versus how the world is going to shape up tomorrow, these leadership values and principle that he is talking about, they don't necessarily go through a radical change, or for that matter even a major change. So they have been relevant in those times, they are relevant today, and they are going to be relevant tomorrow also. What he did for his first book was, and I think he wrote it when he was the age of 50. So 1947, if he was born, 1997 is when he wrote that book. And somebody came up to him and said that, John, thank you so much for writing this book. You really have helped me to improve as a leader and change my outlook towards leadership, and also how I have started to apply leadership principles, and I see a huge improvement. The only thing is, wish that you could have written this book about 20 years back, and I would have had accessibility of this book about 20 years back. And he said that unfortunately, that would not have been possible, because this is my 50 years of experience with leadership, my own experimentation, my own failures, and my own learning. So that's what he said, is that you actually have to go through a process in order to learn the leadership. And in this book itself, he has one particular law called the law of a process, where he said that leadership develops not in a day, but it develops daily. So these laws can be learned. Each of these 21 laws, they stand alone. Each of them carry consequences with them. And each of these 21 laws are the foundation of leadership. I want to show you the list of these 21 laws, not necessarily going through all of them. And again, when you pick up this book, in case if you haven't yet read it, then you can actually pick up any law from anywhere and you can read and finish the book. But my humble request will be to start with the first law at least, which is the law of the lid, and that we are going to talk about in this particular call. So if you can go to the next slide, Rajat, thank you. So these are his laws: the law of the lid, the law of influence, the law of process, the law of navigation, E.F. Hutton, the law of solid ground, the law of respect. And for each of these laws, you will say that he's got a tagline. Next couple of slides very quickly. And again, I'm not going to read this out, but just leave it on the screen for a minute for each one of you to take a look and maybe perhaps pick up which is the one that you are going to go as and read as the second law for yourself, because I once again will put a request of reading the first law first, which is the law of the lid. All right. Okay, so coming to this particular first law of lid, where he says that everything rises and falls on leadership. And he goes and illustrates this by talking about success without leadership and success with leadership. And he says that nowhere in the world, any organization, whether it is a church, whether it is a corporate, whether it is a sporting club, has ever gone beyond its captain. For that matter, not even a country has ever gone beyond the captain of that country, which could be a king in the past era, versus, let's say, whosoever is the head of your government, which could be the prime minister or president. And what he says is that, and he illustrates in his conference as well as in his video, that if you, let's say, take this bottle as your leadership ability, and your leadership is, let's say, at the bottom of the bottle, it is at 0, versus at the top near the cap, it is on a scale of 10. And he says, let's take for a moment that your leadership capability is at a scale of 4. And he then puts a fly into the particular vessel or bottle and closes the lid at this stage of 4. And he asked the audience, saying is that, what do you think is this fly going to do, which is supposedly one of your team members? So I'm going to put this question to the august audience here. 10 minutes. Star 1 to cancel and continue the conference. Sorry. All right. So therefore I'm posing this question to you, saying is that if your leadership, or if the leader's leadership is at a level of 4 and there is a team member under him, what will he or she try to do? Anyone?
I think he will reach up to the level of the leader as the highest, probably.
Okay. That's Mrinal's view. What about anybody else? And I saw Nitin getting...
Yeah, so I think it's the ability of leader to accept that I have my capabilities and one of my team members are exhibiting more capabilities than me, and allowing him to have that space of going out. If leader has a capability to accept and be humble about it, the team member can fly out. But if the leader does not have a capability, then eventually either fly or butterfly will go somewhere else. I'm talking about the corporate industry where person will leave the job or going somewhere else, and he's leader. Or he will limit himself to his capability and be frustrated about it.
Okay. Anyone else? And maybe one more response.
Yeah, I second that and completely agree with that. Either you give the space to somebody else to live up to their, full potential and add to the team's success. And if you can't, then, you're going to suffocate the people and eventually they will fly. You can't stop them. Yeah.
So thank you for those. Sorry, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so in the equation that Avesh was talking about, when we take any ecosystem in its entirety, whether it's a particular team, an organization, or a country, it seldom happens that somebody can cross over the leader and go above. So typically what happens is people look up to a role model. I look up to my president, my CEO, and aspire at the best to be the CEO of that organization. If I'm commanding a unit, aspire to be at the head or at the helm of that affairs. So seldom do people look beyond the leadership unless it's in smaller teams within an organization. But if you're talking about people at the helm of affairs, you typically tend to look up to them as the role model and aspire to be at par with them. And that is where the limitation comes. If the leader himself is at, say, 4 and the fly is beneath him, he will at the max try and swim or move up to the leader and be very happy that I have reached this level and then contain his growth.
Right. Okay. And thank you for those inputs, and it resonates with, please.
Yeah, what I would say is that a leader would swim to the surface, and if he can and has an ability beyond that, he'd just simply fly away.
Okay. So as I said, great inputs, and thank you for that. And it resonates with a lot of stuff that John Maxwell also says. And let me also put in and add my perspective to that. So if you look at this, yeah, in an ideal world, if a leader is aware about where his or her current leadership abilities are, and then if he takes action to move it up, the organization can possibly grow. Versus many a times it so happens is that over a period of time, the leader is not even aware about where he or she is. And there are so many examples, that we have. If we take our ex-Prime Minister, Mr. Manmohan Singh, okay, if we take about our, let's say, cricketing, from the cricketing world, let's say, take Sachin Tendulkar's example, okay, or Mahendra Singh Dhoni's example. So what John Maxwell says is that if your capability or if your leadership capability is at a level 4, and if you have a team member, the natural tendency, as many one of you have said, is that will be to come right up to you. But at the same time, this is where it gets capped. So you're going to hit it once, twice, thrice, 4 times, and then you are programmed now, because you're going to hit yourself and there's nothing that is happening. You're going to start making a U-turn at 3.9, 3.8, 3.7, 3.6, 3.5, because the leader is also not doing anything to change the ecosystem environment. Why the hell should you really waste your energy? And therefore what happens is that it puts a cap on the entire organization's performance. What you also rightly, in fact, many of you said, is that if that particular team member is very motivated and has a life plan in place, has a professional plan in place, is really determined person, then definitely he or she is going to find some route or the other in order to fly outside, and from under you and go to any other organization. And therefore he says is that many times what happens is that over a period of time, when leaders get into this belief that I have been there, I have seen it, I know it all, okay, and my way is the highway and all that stuff, and they have stopped listening, they are not doing anything to move themselves, and therefore the entire organization continues to underperform. And the classic example I would say is Bill Gates or Narayan Murthy for a period of time. Now again, when I say Narayan Murthy, people will all have their own views, especially with the recent incidents that have happened. But if we take example of Bill Gates, after a particular time, he realized that he doesn't have too much of value to add to the day-to-day operations of Microsoft as an organization. And that is where he said, is that I need to get somebody from outside in a Tim Cook who's going to then perhaps help me to take the organization to the next level. I think, did I get the right example or did I make a mistake? Is it Tim Cook or Steve Ballmer? Anyway, so the whole idea is that he decided to get somebody else from the outside and he sidestepped and he says, okay, I can be an evangelist, I can be your coach, guide, mentor and all of that, but you now help to take this organization to the next level. Versus, my example of my own experience in my last organization, I'm not going to really name it, but when I was working for an IT products company in Trivandrum, I got stuck with the chairman of this particular organization because he had stopped listening. And we tried to kind of get him to the Harvard, program for the CEOs, where when he went in there, he avoided the 360-degree feedback. I got him into a very informal offsite where I got his team members to give him inputs in terms of what they think that he should improve, and thereby the organization is going to get impacted in a positive manner. And he said later to me on one-on-one basis is, and since most of these people operate out of different geographies, understand me and all that stuff. And what has happened is that, again, you can say I was a fly there and I had my own plans in my life, and therefore I decided to kind of move out of that particular place. This is my 7th year and I'm still keeping a watch on that company, and the organization has still not moved from where it was in terms of whether it is its top line, whether it is its bottom line, or whether it is its, like, it is still for the last about 11 or 12 years has been wanting to get to an IPO, but has not yet made there. So what you see on the screen is where he talks about, and he explains further after giving his example of the bottle, the fly, etc., etc., is that if you look at how does leadership really helps you to, or leadership skills help you to become more effective as a professional, as an individual. So he says if you take these two particular things on two different axes, one is leadership ability, the other is success dedication. What he talks about success dedication is the functional skills and the technical skills. And if I have to take an example, that if I was just a facilitator, then my success dedication or my technical and functional skills be good, I would say oratory skills, presentation skills, computer skills, and like, how to deal with technology, etc., etc. And if I continue to just improve in that area and not do anything on my leadership ability, and Rajat, if you can move to the next slide, please. Then how much ever that I'm going to put in efforts, I will only go linear in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I can maybe perhaps learn, instead of doing my training programs using the PowerPoint version, 2017, I can go to a 2018, I can bring more jazz to my slides, etc., etc. But my overall effectiveness, if I'm only working on my technical functional skills, will be very linear. Versus, and if you go to the next slide, if I start also working on my leadership ability, parallelly, this is how my overall circle of influence and effectiveness kind of. And if I have to take the same example of facilitation skills, what are leadership ability in an effect, in a facilitation session? It's about how do I connect to my participant? How do I first touch their hearts before I start asking for their hand? How is it that I, demonstrate empathy? How do I acknowledge their business issues and their real-time challenges? And how is it then I start relating those with the skills and competencies that I'm talking about in the classroom or maybe in a virtual world? How is it that I kind of, build on their examples and help them find solutions? How is it that I not just connect with 1 or 2% and demonstrate my biasness in a class of 12 and 15 versus encourage everybody to participate and give them that confidence that no idea is a silly idea, no question is a silly question and all that. And that is, if I kind of continue to work in both these two areas, my effectiveness increases exponentially. So to this, he also has a story to illustrate. And if we can go to that particular story, and maybe after I have done with my story is that when I'll pause and I'll kind of ask for questions and all that. So Rajat, if you can go to the next slide. And the story is that, and wait, you'll have to class, and once I finish one particular bullet point. It said that in 19, and I'm sure some of you would have read about the story or already know about the story, so hold on to your horses just for the benefit of everybody else who may not possibly have read or heard about this one. So in 1930, two brothers, Dick and Morris, they moved from New Hampshire to California to chase the American dream, and they joined a movie studio set in Hollywood. But their entrepreneurial, desire or streak didn't really make them happy at that particular movie studio. So they started a theater of themselves by the name of Glendale, which was 5 miles northeast of Hollywood. And for 4 years, they actually did not have a great, I would say, business performance for that matter. So then And if you can move to the next bullet, Rajat, 1937, they started off a small drive-in restaurant in Pasadena, east of Glendale. And why did they start this small drive-in restaurant in? Because this was now almost like a new trend in the marketplace. If you go to the next bullet, is that, people were having something called is this car hops. So you take your car to a particular, restaurant area, you park your car, just like, in fact, people from Bombay, when you take your cars to, let's say, Bade Mian or Baghdadi, or for people who take in Delhi their car to Kakaji Dhaba or somewhere, and you park your car and somebody kind of runs up to your car with a menu card, you order for the food, they bring the food in a particular tray to your car, you have the food, they then bring you to the bill, and you ride off or you drive off from that particular place. So similarly, these two brothers in 1940, they started off this operations in San Bernardino, which was about 50 miles east of Los Angeles. And they were at that point of time, using china plates, glassware, metal utensils, etc., etc. And they introduced a lot of, I would say, items on the menu, as well as they kind of were trying to improve their services. And pretty soon they had joined the elite of this particular locality, because they were having an annual sales to the tune of about $200,000, and each of the brothers were sharing, a profit to the tune of 50,000 each in USD. Later, and they kept on improving, all right, and they replaced this car hops with walk-up customers, and they also eliminated the plates, the glasswares, the metal utensils. They streamlined their operations by making their kitchen and assembly line. They introduced something called as a speedy service system, and thereby what happened was that they reduced their cost of operation, and they started to pass on those benefits to the customer. And the goal was to fill the customer's order in just about 30 seconds or less. And this continued, and by 1950 they had touched upon an annual revenue of close to about 350,000, and both the brothers were laughing to the bank with almost like 100,000 USD as profit share. If you go to the next bullet, please. So yeah, question for you. Any guesses as to who were these two brothers, Dick and Morris? Okay, so I have a couple of response. Arvind says KFC, and Rajat says McDonald. Anybody else through voice who would like to attempt on that, or be different from Rajat or Arvind, or maybe perhaps have the same sentiment? Nadine and Martin, to everyone, McDonald's. And yes, Rajat, if you can click on to the next. Absolutely correct. So yes, it is McDonald's. So that was the first, you can say, 1937 to 1950 story for the two brothers. If you can go to the next slide and the next bullet. So 1952, this thing of franchising was getting into fashion, and these guys also attempted to that, but that was a complete failure. And therefore, what happened is that in 1952, their partner by the name of Ray Kroc, he was actually a machine supplier for milkshakes for their franchisees. And I think Dick and Morris had kind of opened close to about 15 franchisees across their locality and a few cities outside where they were. But then it was not really going further for them. A lot of people had approached them saying is that, can you give us the franchisee? Can you also give us the permission to use your name, etc.? But they kind of did not heed to that. But Ray Kroc, kept on pestering them, persuading them, influencing them, and finally they tied up with 1954 with Ray Kroc. And Rajat, the next one. Now, what happened is that by 1955, Ray Kroc actually, started off what he called as the McDonald's Systems Incorporated, which today and later and today is called as the McDonald Corporation. He bought the rights from the Morris brothers. Now, unfortunately, the right was actually sold to somebody else. And when you go to Wikipedia and punch in Ray Kroc, you will get to know more details on that. But Ray Kroc didn't kind of, leave it that way. He kept on pestering, persuading, influencing the brothers, and finally he got the rights to McDonald. And what he did was is that he started a model and prototype so that he could actually sell the other franchisee. What he also started to do, which perhaps the Morris brothers failed, is that he spent a lot of time in identifying the sharpest people who he recruited. And the other things that he did was is that while he was at the age of 50, he still kind of worked for long hours as if that he was just about 30. And this was his first job of when I think he was a baseball player or a basketball player or something like that. He sacrificed a lot of frills at home. He gave away his country club membership. The first 8 years, he didn't take a salary, money from the bank against his life insurance, etc. And between 1955 to 1959, he had opened close to about 100 McDonald outlets across United States and few outside United States. If you go to the next one. And in year 1961 was when he bought the exclusive rights to McDonald's from Dick and Morris for 2.75 million. And the next couple of bullets, Rajat, please. In 1963, he had got to 500 McDonald's outlet. And in 1984, if I'm not wrong with that date, before he died, he had created, the world's largest franchisee, McDonald's for that matter. Now, when you see this story, and don't click on the bullet at this point of time, Rajat, and if you look at his diagram of success with and without leadership, how does this story connect to that particular model? So I once again, throw this question open to the group before I show you what, according to me, I think are my views on it.
Okay, so since everybody is silent, I'll start.
Mm-hmm. And if you can just go to one, if you can click once. Okay, yeah, thank you. Right.
So
yes,
in my opinion, the Morris brothers here were the leaders who were a cap at that point in time, and they were having a hard time building the company that they wanted to. But Ray Kroc, he's the leader who pushed those limits, and so I'm not too sure here in terms of who build their leadership effectiveness and who was working on the skill only. I still have to think about it. But from the perspective of the leader, I think the Ray Kroc is the person who took up the baton from Morris Brothers and said, okay, you're not able to go beyond a particular limit, and I will take you to different places. And that's where the phrase of "what got you here won't get you there" also comes into my mind.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Nitin. Anyone else?
So I think my understanding of McDonald's story is from the movie called The Founder, as Arvind says. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's a lot embellishment in the story itself from the original one in the movie. But I think the amount of diligence that, Ray had.
Ray Kroc, yeah.
Ray had was much more than the Morris brothers. And there was huge trust issues with Morris brothers. They had a concept to control everything. And in that art, they did not let things happen. Whereas Ray was very clear that let it happen, and he was always looking out for something else while he was growing himself at the same time. So which is why he expanded, including trying to get families to invest and make them managers of the outlets rather than getting a upstart from the market to become. So he's like a husband and wife coming in running the franchisee for him rather than. So those kind of thought processes actually became the big idea at that point for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, also if you look at this, in a way, when he was empowering people, he was also kind of trying to ensure is that he was maintaining the quality of the franchisee. So he never gave people, people came to Ray Kroc saying is that, can I get franchisee for multiple outlets? Versus he said that no, it will be only one for you and also one in these many kilometers and mile across the particular city or location. So while he said is that, because that's the way that we are going to kind of, bring in the value to the table, grow the brand and all of that. And yes, definitely what Rajat, you and Nitin said, and I have some of the points that I captured on the template, which is again just a demonstrative list and not an exhaustive ones. And if you can click on one bullet at a time, please. So Ray Kroc definitely had a vision which was far more, I would say, holistic as well as further to than what the Morris brother had. That's one. That's again a leadership trait, as we all know, is that people talk about. He bought the rights to the franchisee, but that he built on it and used it as a model and prototype. So he brought innovation and creativity to the table. That was another thing that he did. The third thing that he did is that, he really invested in people right from hiring them right to even training them, developing them and growing them. If you look at the next bullet, he himself was a role model. So he didn't allow the age or let's say the physical condition to kind of, because again, with any startup, all of us know that you have to put in the necessary hours, sweat and blood into the business. And he was walking the talk for that matter, which again is a leadership trait. The next one. And then you can click on the next 3-4 maybe. So, and again, he really role model in terms of that if I have to grow this business and take this particular, I would say, model and the brand to the next level, then one of the laws of leadership is the law of sacrifice. And he demonstrated that. And I get reminded of one of our conversations which we had with Rajat, where he talked about his own experience of the first, few years of him getting, leaving the cushy corporate job and getting into the coaching world. And how in fact, and many of you, I guess, on this call will have a similar story. Next, please. Right. So more on the story you can get in there. Now, my question to this group is, and I'm cognizant of the fact is that we are at 6:46. So how does this particular chapter and this particular concept, connects with what we are trying to do in the coaching fraternity? So we can go to the next slide title. And again, before I put in my thoughts, let's keep the floor open for everybody to respond.
Avesh, I'll come in here. One
Yes,
of the key
Arun.
things that I'm seeing is how the Morris brothers were not able to see the unknown that was available for the Ray Kroc to actually see. And another thing is so one of the things that I took away from the movie was the value that the Morris brothers actually had is they believed in slow and steady growth. They never wanted a fast-paced, really chugging or really, very fast kind of a pace for their business. And that came from, in fact, the other brother, the elder brother, who is actually the finance guy. Yeah, he tends to kind of showcase that specific trait that no, things have to be slow, it's a business, we are still building it, and so on and so forth. But Ray was like,
Right.
no, this is it, this is exactly where we need to rush, this is what you guys have actually got. So that was a value check for the brothers, and Ray proved that entire value wrong for them, that you
Okay.
can go fast and really still make a business out of the whole thing.
Right. So similarly, so let's say when we are meeting up with our existing clients or whether our prospective clients, how do we use this law of lid, in order to get them to, or rather, let me put it this way: how do we use this so that we catch their attention, we get them to lend their ear and minds to us, and from there we build onto, like in many cases where we are working as we have our own entities and all that, how do we move it to a commercial thing? For people like me who are still working for an organization, how do I sell what do you call a coaching opportunity within the organization? So my question is more to do with that.
So, Avesh, this is Mrinal here. I'm
Mrinal.
thinking broadly.
Yeah.
So, for me, it looks like the lead could be at least one is, what is the lead that I believe I have as a coach? So that would give me a certain possibilities to think about or to consider. And another could be, what is the lead about the coachee that I have, that I believe. And that's another possibility to see what's possible in that area, if that is another lead. So what's coming up for me is these two, and also maybe in the conversation of coaching, it could be the outcome that the coachee says. That could be a lead from the coach's perspective, and that could be used as a metaphor if I have to think through from the lens of what's the lead. So these are the three broad things that comes to my mind. And it seems very interesting to look at from this metaphor. So thanks for sharing.
My pleasure. Okay. Anybody else?
So I was wondering, what does lid mean here? Is the lid a cap? Is what is meaning here? Leadership. So the law of capping is what is being meant here by saying lid, the law of lid.
Okay. So if you look at this, one response that you have got on the chat is from Arvind, which says limits, known ability in comparison with unknown potential. Okay. You can also look at it as, blind spots that you have hit and that are, keeping you away from your effectiveness. Okay. So it could be in any area. Like, let's say one of the examples that I can give you is a CEO of an organization who has led the organization to move from, let's say, 100 million to a 500 million. But beyond that, is unable to now grow that organization. Okay. Has put in a vision statement is that in the next 3 fiscal years, I want to take this company to the $1 billion club. But does he even know in terms of what is it to lead an organization at 1 billion? But before that, how do you take this company from 500 million to a 1 billion? What is it that I myself will have to do in terms of inspiring my workforce to the first thing is that how to gain their buy-in, that yes, this is a realistic goal, this is quite an inspiring goal. The second is in terms of that how do we then kind of keep everybody on the course?
Because so what is the law? So what is the law here? When John is saying law of lid, does he mean that everybody has a lid, or does he mean that become aware of your lid and expand? Is that so? What is the law here, which is unchanging, right? So he says the law is time tested. What is the law here?
Right. So what he says, and this is my interpretation, is in terms of is that if you look at this, if you have to evolve as a leader, at each and every stage, you have to be aware about is that are you hitting the limiting factors for yourself in the context of what you are trying to do, okay, and where you are today, and therefore start working in that area so that you continue to grow and evolve as the leader, and therefore you take yourself forward and upwards, you take your team forward and upwards, you take your organization, your club, your community up, forward and upward. That's what he's talking about.
Okay, it's a very interesting thing. I'll have to probably read it. But
Sure.
I still have to understand it from the wording's perspective. When you say law, so law looks like to me is a unchanging, time-tested, as you mentioned. So law of gravity, right? It never fails. It will come down all the time.
Right.
Law of harvesting, what you sow is what you reap. So what is the law here?
So thank you for bringing that metaphor of law of gravity, because in his book itself, somewhere he talks about, or in the preface or somewhere, where somebody asked this question saying to him is that, why do you say that these are laws and all this stuff? And where he gives this example, saying is that law of gravity, you don't see it. Okay, law of gravity, you don't feel it, but it exists. The only way to challenge that is go on the rooftop and jump from there and see what does it do to you. And he says that if you look at, similarly with these leadership laws, people who have applied these principles and laws in their own life has evolved as leaders, have increased their circle of influence, has therefore impacted the world. They have impacted their organizations, they have impacted their communities in a very positive manner. Versus he gives a lot of examples where people who have not applied it, and therefore they have then been known as people who could only be successful to this level. Beyond that, they couldn't take this organization. Okay, so maybe once you read his book, and also as a follow-up to developing a leader in you, or the leader 360-degree leader, that will perhaps provide you more interest. But that's what is my take and interpretation of that particular. And again, I've been fortunate enough to work with some leaders, and where I have seen a clear, distinct, I would say, I've experienced this, is that how when people have hit their limits, their lids, their caps, and they have either stopped listening, or on the contrary, they have become aware and they have done something about it, how the consequences and rewards have been in play. Okay.
It's extremely interesting, Avesh, I think.
Great.
Very, very interesting. Yeah.
Right.
I will definitely have to go back and read now.
Sure. And look at some of the responses that are coming on the chat. So one from Abhilasha is, where is person position in the current context, and what could one do to move forward to realize his potential? What are the possibilities for the person? And those are quite pertinent questions that will help somebody to recognize his or her lane. So if I go to this particular slide, where the way that I see the connection, and I have used it in certain cases, and I'm using it right now within my organization, which is spread out across 9 countries, 60 delivery centers in over 35 cities of the world, is first and foremost is, and if you can click on the bullet, Rajat, is to position the need, is that we definitely require our leaders to recognize what are their strengths and what are their limiting factors, and therefore at least pick up one strength area and one growth area whereby we can contribute to our organization goals that we here are running on a particular strategy called the 948. So we have the 9D goal. We have 4 basically areas: financials, customer sat, employee sat, and corporate social responsibility. And we have 8, I would say, tracks on that, which include some market-facing initiative and some internal, I would say, initiatives such as various practices on human resources and all that. And that is where I have used this particular stuff in order to appeal to the executive committee in my organization, which is the CEO and his direct report, is that we as an organization, starting from the CEO, should work on building organization talent through coaching and feedback. And where I'm positioning is that my CEO himself requires an executive coach. Okay. And he should pick up 5 and 6 people to coach thereafter, who should start coaching the others. And likewise, it should get cascaded. And we should only approach it with one model and one, I would say, methodology instead of creating too much of confusion in the company. The second bullet, it also helps to gain the buy-in while maintaining the self-esteem and self-confidence of the organization. And especially when you are dealing with people who are maybe in the later stage of their corporate life, or even at the later stage of their life, where there again I'm saying is that they have a very strong pedigree. They have come from very successful organizations. They have been, and they generally have this particular tendency of saying is that, what are you talking to, are you talking to me? Are you saying is that I have some limitations or blind spots? So without hurting their self-esteem and self-confidence, we gain their buy-in is that, okay, while you have so many strengths, there is one particular area if you can focus on, that's how it is going to impact on helping this entire organization to move forward. So that's the other application where I use it and have been successful to some extent. If you go to the third one, it also helps the positioning and need for assessment. And again, as us who are running this as our profession or who are supporting the organizations, this also results into psychometrics, which can also result into commercial gains for us. All right, whether it is psychometric or 360 degree, etc. If you go to the next bullet, Rajat. Designing a coaching plan which is on the basis of priority, because many a times in what one has seen, that sometimes a lot of people think is that everything is broken here and we need to kind of go for a complete transformation, versus helping people to design a coaching, a training, a developmental plan which is based on priority and which is again connected to the, I would say, organization's prerogatives, priorities. Next one, please. And what it also helps is, and the final bullet is in terms of the periodic reinforcements. So this is where your strengths, this is where possibly we have an opportunity work on. All right. So again, use the same examples from various world, McDonald's, whether it is Infosys, whether it is Apple, Google, Uber, whichever company, and then says that there's nothing wrong in terms of recognizing that yes, you also have an opportunity to put in efforts in order to improve and continue to grow as a professional, as an individual. So with that, I, on the hour or maybe a minute past that, I come to the end of the presentation, but at the same time still leave the floor open for any final questions, thought, feedback, and inputs.
Rajat, can you show the second last slide? So, Avesh, thank you very much, actually. So this is very, very interesting to know. What has started me set thinking, since it's now so fresh about the law of lead, I would like to ask in terms of the application in the coaching world, whatever the points you have shared here on this application in the coaching world slide. Do you believe that whatever is here is something which is outside the lid or something which is inside the lid for you?
Help me understand that question when you say outside the lid and inside the lid.
Okay, so for example, let's say point number 3, this positioning the need for assessment, or it could be any bullet, positioning the need. So my curious question is, if you had to think inside the lid, what could this bullet point would be? And since you're thinking, probably got inspired to think outside the lead, is this positioning the need came outside the lead, or is it still within the lead? That's the question.
I'm
So
still
for
trying
example,
to, yeah, that'll help.
it could be like designing a coaching plan basis the priority, or designing a
Right,
coaching plan on basis of the priority.
right.
Now, is this really thinking outside the lead, or is it something within the lead? So if we have to talk about lead being, let's say, as a possibility, a completely new possibility, not something that is I am aware of that possibility. So
Right.
it's in the domain of the unknown, if we have to really think that. So my curious question, it is nothing right or wrong here at all, but my curious question is, all of these came for you outside or from the domain of the unknown, which is beyond the lid, or within the lid?
Okay. So let me now try to answer this through an example itself. So in one of the organizations, and this was the time when I was working for this training company called Achieve Global. All right. And one of my ex-colleagues, my ex-manager, in fact, or not my manager, in fact, he had helped me get recruited in this company called G. And after a while, we were just maintaining relationship outside the organization because he had left. And then I had changed, in fact, 2, 3 companies and all that stuff. And all of a sudden, he called me up saying is that one of my presidents of sales and marketing from London has called me to check up on this organization called Achieve Global. And somewhere that rang a bell because I thought that you were still working with that company. So, and we require a sales training program. Why? Because that we need to kind of, we have set up a new target, etc., and all that stuff. So therefore, through my line of questioning, when I use my own selling skills, I asked him in terms of is that what is occurring now, okay, and what are the changes that they have made basis their goal and priorities. How is it that impacting, or what is the tune to which it is giving them the results? What else have they thought in order to do differently? Okay, and then I kind of said that what putting in a coaching culture in place, because I can pretty much come train 200 people in that organization, walk away with a fat bill of almost like 75,000 USD, on which I'm going to get about 12 to 15% commission, etc. But I can guarantee and promise that the organization is not going to move an inch forward. To that question of mine, he started saying is that, why do you say that? And I said, look, I can come as an outside catalyst, do all of this stuff for you and leave. But if you're not going to sustain it, if you're not going to own it, if you're not going to run it as a program thereafter, you will have difficulty. And then what I did is that we said is that, can we therefore look at in terms of what are your thoughts on creating sales coaching as a culture for your team? And then what is your current coaching capability in the organization, where I introduced some of the assessment tools, all right, to really throw onto his face saying is that, while you are embarking on the sales, effectiveness stuff, you're going to miserably fail. Now, in a way, I also doubled my billing for that organization. That was another thing. And to tell you the secret, I landed the job in that company. Okay, with following the entire integrity and ethic by talking to my CEO, etc., because that was the stage in my life. So that was one case. The other was if I look at my current organization, where we have taken some ambitious goal, and we were saying is that, so where to start? And that is where, in fact, we used again this particular stuff. And we said we don't even know as to where we are strong, what is it we lack, and who is going to help us identify that. And that is where we scouted at the marketplace and finally zeroed it into one of the leading leadership development organizations of the world. All right. They came in, they did an assessment of the organization, and they said, here are these 4 business drivers under which you have these 12 leadership competencies. If you work on these areas, you are going to achieve your goals in the next 3-4 fiscal, otherwise you're going to miss it. And then what we said is that, okay, let's do also some internal reflection. And we said 12 is too big a number. Can we get it down to 6 that makes more meaning for us. And that is where we have started to work on the priority. And under that also we said, let's today for this fiscal only look at one particular area. Can we build the organization talent by coaching people on how to write good goals, how to do good self-appraisal, how to do great appraisal of the of their teams, and how to do normalization and calibration in the right manner. Nothing else that we are going to touch for the next 18 months, because moment that if we take anything else, we will be spreading ourselves too thin and we are going to go. Having said that, we are not going to stop some of the initiatives that we have.
Thank you
So
so
I
much,
don't know if
Avesh.
I've answered.
Really.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
I take that
Yes.
as if that I have answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We are way beyond the time. So
Yes, we are beyond the time, and anybody else?
So thank you so much, Avesh. Brilliant session. Learned a lot. Definitely, it was new. I'm sure for all of us, right? It's not something that we have read earlier, and I do believe the law of the lid can be utilized in coaching, like you said. And most importantly, while it's important to identify the need, it can be used for measuring also the coaching effectiveness. Okay, so I'm just thinking of the head when you started talking around it, saying how can we utilize it as a visual marker for how the coaching has impacted, right? So it can be a good tool to create.
Right.
But thank you so much. From on behalf of everybody else who joined, thank you for joining. We'll keep on having. I hope you enjoyed, you learned, and the next one I think is going to be MG, right, Evan? MG has recently attended the ICF Converge in Washington, and he has got a lot of data to share with us in terms of what happened there in ICF Converge.
Yeah, so
thank you once again for the opportunity. And yeah, I see now more faces, old and new. So hi to Nadine, Martin, hi there. And somebody says iPhone, so I don't know the name. Ija, Murthy. So thank you so much. It was a pleasure. And thank you for those inputs as well as those questions.
iPhone is Priya.
Oh, okay. Hi, Priya.
Bye, guys. You have a good evening. Take care. We'll see you again.
Thanks, Avesh. Bye. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Fantastic session.
See you
Bye.
guys. Bye. Thank you, Avesh.
Pleasure.